The NFL's hiring timeline makes absolutely no sense. Let me break down exactly what I mean. Imagine for just a second that you're not sitting in front of your screen with dry lips. Instead, imagine that you're an NFL football player. You've had a great season and your team makes a run to the playoffs, but your contract is about to be up and other teams are interested in signing you. This is the payday you've been working toward your entire career. But there's only one problem. Your team is still playing and you have a game to prepare for this weekend. And sure, you could tell these teams that are calling you to wait until your season's over, but if you do that, there's a very high chance that some other free agent might take your deal instead. So despite the playoff game ahead of you, you decide to start taking meetings with those other teams, fly out to their facilities, and start negotiating potential contracts. You're simultaneously preparing for one of the biggest games of your career, and you're prepping for the biggest interviews of your life all at the same time. Now you're probably watching this video thinking, Troy, you idiot. That's not how NFL free agency works at all, and you'd be 100% right. The NFL does not allow players to even talk to prospective teams while they're playing for another team, let alone go and meet with them and start having interviews. That would be insane. But now what if I told you that when it comes to coaches, this is exactly what's happening right now, and it's what happens every year during the postseason. The hiring cycle for NFL coaches starts during the playoffs. And of course, many of the top coaching candidates are often still coaching on playoff teams. As soon as the regular season ends, teams with head coaching vacancies can start requesting interviews. If a coordinator that they want is on a team that didn't make the playoffs, there's no issue. That coach's season is over and he can start interviewing wherever he wants. But if the coordinator that they want is on a playoff team, that's where things start to get a little bit complicated. As I alluded to earlier, that coach is obviously still working, still game planning, and still trying to win a championship. But for whatever reason, the NFL has set up a system that allows these coaches to go out and interview for these jobs before their season is even officially over. The NFL knows this is a problem, which is why in 2023, they actually tried to fix it. But I would argue that their fix failed miserably. Starting the day after the regular season ended, teams with head coaching vacancies could start requesting interviews, and virtual interviews could happen right away. In-person interviews could start as soon as the wildcard weekend was over, and there was no limit on how long these interviews could be. Coaches in the playoffs were flying out to these interviews with new teams, all while still trying to get a full week of game prep in. So in 2023, the owners voted to make some changes. First, they pushed back in-person interviews. Instead of in-person interviews being allowed after the wildcard weekend, teams now have to wait until the divisional round is over to bring a candidate in face-to-face. Secondly, they capped virtual interviews at 3 hours total. While they did cap how long virtual interviews could be, these virtual interviews could still happen during the playoffs. Teams with a first-round bye can have their coordinators start doing virtual interviews during that bye week, and teams that play on wildcard weekend can have their coaches start interviewing just 3 days after that game, which of course is right in the middle of divisional round prep. Before we get to the rest of the video, here's a quick word from today's sponsor. This is Troy. You don't want to be anything like him. Just look at him. He's pathetic. And do you know why he's pathetic? It's because he's been eating gas station burritos and skipping meals like it's a replacement for a personality. And now he's about to say, but I don't have time to cook. He's a perfect example of why Factor exists. Factor delivers fresh, healthy, never frozen meals straight to your door. They can be ready in as little as 2 minutes, and they have over 100 options that rotate weekly. And would you look at that? Troy actually started using it. His favorite meal is the truffle butter filet mignon, and he says that Factor makes it easy to make healthy choices. Of course, he's still pathetic, but maybe a little less now. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code TroybertFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for an entire year. That's code TroybertFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. A huge thank you to Factor for being today's sponsor. Now back to the video. Let's take a second and think about what it actually takes to prepare for a head coaching interview. This isn't some normal job interview where they ask you about your background and ask you to name your 3 biggest strengths and weaknesses. These are 3-hour deep dives where owners and GMs want to know absolutely everything. They're probably being asked things like, what's your offensive and defensive philosophy? Or how would you build out this coaching staff? And most importantly, how would you handle a quarterback that gives himself his own nickname? These are the kinds of questions that you can't just wing. Coaching candidates are likely putting together full presentations and building out organizational charts for staffs that they haven't hired yet, all while researching the roster and cap situation of a team that they're not even on, all while they're supposed to be fully invested in winning a game this weekend. When the NFL came to the table with a fix for this, I think they identified the wrong problem. They decided that travel time was the problem, and it definitely was part of the problem, I'll give them that. But the real problem is what I mentioned earlier. Preparing for a career-defining interview takes real time and real energy. And that time and energy has to come from somewhere. Can you truly be fully locked in on a playoff game while simultaneously preparing for one of the biggest interviews of your life? If you're asking me, I would say it's not possible to fully dedicate to either one of those things. And if you want to see what that actually looks like in practice, you don't have to go back very far because we have a prime example of it from last year. As we know, last year the Lions were the top seed in the NFC with the best record. They were favorites to make it to the Super Bowl. They had home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and they had a first-round bye. Because the team was so good, they also had two of the top coaching candidates in the entire league, which of course were offensive coordinator Ben Johnson and defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn. During that bye week, both coaches started taking interviews. Ben Johnson talked to the Bears, Jaguars, Patriots, and the Raiders, and Aaron Glenn talked to the Bears, Jaguars, Raiders, Saints, and Jets. That's 9 total interviews between the two of them. And remember, the NFL capped these virtual interviews at 3 hours. So even if we're being conservative here, that's somewhere between 12 and 15 hours of interviews each. And that's just with the interviews themselves. That's not counting all the time spent prepping presentations, researching rosters, and everything else that goes into preparing for these high-level interviews. Then in the divisional round, the Lions ended up getting upset by the Commanders, and almost immediately, fans started connecting the dots and social media was flooded with posts of people blaming the coordinators for being too distracted to game plan, and that they seemed to care more about their next job than the one that they had right in front of them. Now, I want to be really clear with something. I am not here to tell you that the reason why the Lions lost is because of the interviews. Maybe they were a factor, maybe they weren't, we'll never know. But here is what I do know. The current system and the way that the timeline is set up has put that question into everyone's head. And once that question is there, it's not going to go away. When a team has its best season in decades and then they go and lose embarrassingly in the playoffs, people are going to start looking for reasons why. And when they find out that both coordinators were doing job interviews leading up to that game, connecting those dots is pretty natural. On the other side of that, what were Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn supposed to do? Were they supposed to turn down those interviews and risk losing out on their dream jobs? Or were they supposed to wait until after the playoffs to interview and hope that those teams weren't already moving on to other candidates? The current system put them in a position where it was always going to be a lose-lose no matter what they chose. And it gave fans a reason to question their integrity and dedication to their team. Now, what happened with the Lions last year isn't some sort of unique situation. This happens every single year, and it's about to start happening right now. Wildcard weekend just ended, and there are 9 teams now with head coaching vacancies. And there will definitely be coaches on playoff teams starting to interview for some of those vacancies. What really gets me about this whole thing is that talking heads and commentators always talk about commitment when it comes to players. If a quarterback is up until 3 a.m. playing Call of Duty the night before a playoff game, Skip Bayless would be tweeting up a storm in all caps about how this quarterback doesn't care about the task ahead of them. But a coordinator can spend 15 hours doing job interviews with rival teams during a playoff week, and I guess that's just standard procedure and we never hear anything about it. That's a huge double standard, and it's one that the NFL created. Players are expected to put everything on the line when it comes to winning a championship. They're putting their bodies through hell, and during the playoffs, they're probably telling all of their teammates to lock in for the rest of the season and get rid of all distractions so they can all unite on one singular goal. Meanwhile, they have to have in the back of their head that the guy calling the plays is having his attention pulled in 2 different directions because he has to choose between his career and his current team. I know for a fact that the NFL knows this is wrong, because if they didn't, they would allow players to start discussing new contracts and start talking to teams before their season even ended. But they don't, and that's why tampering rules exist. If a team even talks to a player under contract without permission, they get hit with fines and lose draft picks. The reason that the penalties for tampering are so steep is because the league fully understands that one of the reasons why we watch is because there's supposed to be a high level of competitive integrity, or else fans would just stop caring. But like I keep saying, for whatever reason, that logic completely disappears when it comes to coaches. And what might be the most frustrating part about all of this is that the fix is not complicated at all. As you may have already guessed, the simplest and easiest solution is that the NFL should not allow interviews until after the Super Bowl. That's it. That's the entire solution. Once the Super Bowl is over, every team with a head coaching vacancy can start interviewing their candidates. Every coordinator who wants a job can start taking meetings, and everyone is on the same timeline. No one has an advantage to start their coaching search early because they got eliminated earlier, and no one has a disadvantage because their team ended up making a deep playoff run. In addition to that, teams would actually get to evaluate candidates properly because those candidates don't have their attention being split in two ways. Coaches would get proper time to prepare for these interviews, and fans will never have to sit and wonder if their coaching staff was mentally checked out during the most important stretch of the season. By the way, I'm not the first person to suggest this. Bill Belichick has gone on record and called the system very disruptive, and he even said that it's in human nature to get distracted by a potential job opening while you're also trying to prepare and call plays for a critical game. He also pointed out that absolutely nobody would be okay with it if it was the players that were doing this. If you go online and you try to find what other coaches have said about this very thing, you'll probably notice that the current coaches have been pretty quiet on the matter. And the reason why is obvious. Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator for the Ravens, interviewed with the Jaguars and the Bears last year, just days before his divisional game. He called the timing unfortunate and then immediately said that it didn't affect his preparation, because what else is he supposed to say? He's not going to tell his current team that he was distracted, and he's not going to tell future employers that he couldn't handle doing both, which is exactly why you won't find many coaches talking about this at all. If you were like me and you're wondering why in the world hasn't the league fixed this, the honest answer is I have absolutely no idea. The only real argument I found while researching for this video that kind of makes sense is that owners obviously don't want to wait to have to start building their coaching staff, so the earlier head start they can get, the better. And yes, I get that. But like I said earlier, if everyone had to wait until after the Super Bowl to even start those conversations, no one is at a disadvantage. It doesn't have to be this way, and the fix is obvious. The league just actually has to do something about it. And that is my entire rant on the coaching hiring timeline. As always, thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you enjoyed this video, you might also enjoy one of my other videos, which I've put on screen right here. I hope everyone has a great playoff weekend, and I will catch you all in the next one.